Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why your brain sometimes plays tricks on you, making you see or judge things in a way that just doesn't seem right? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating theory called Bayesian efficient coding, and how it might explain some of those perceptual puzzles. Think about it, our senses are constantly bombarded with information from the world. How does our brain take all that raw data and turn it into a meaningful experience, and how does it do it so efficiently? This paper suggests that our brains are incredibly smart about this. They've evolved to process information in a way that is both efficient and takes advantage of the predictable patterns we see in our environment. It's like our brains have a built-in prediction machine that's always trying to make sense of things. This theory, Bayesian efficient coding, is actually a clever combination of two big ideas in neuroscience and psychology. The first is efficient coding. Imagine trying to send a message down a noisy phone line. You want to send as much clear information as possible without using too much energy or bandwidth. Efficient coding is like that for our brains. It suggests that our sensory systems are designed to capture the most important information from the environment with the least amount of neural effort. The second idea is Bayesian inference. This is like a smart guessing game where your brain uses what it sees right now. The sensory input and its past experiences or beliefs, what we call priors, to make the best possible guess about what is out there. So, at its heart, Bayesian efficient coding says that how our brains encode sensory information and how they interpret it are both shaped by the statistics, the predictable patterns of the natural world. This means the regularities we encounter every day, from the way light falls on objects to the typical sounds we hear, influence not just what we perceive but also how accurately we perceive it. This is a big deal because it can explain why we sometimes make systematic errors or biases in our judgments, things that might seem counterintuitive. The researchers here talk a lot about Bayes' rule. This is basically a fancy mathematical way of saying how to update your beliefs when you get new information. If you thought there was a 50/50th chance of rain and then you see dark clouds, you use Bayes' rule to update your belief to a much higher chance of rain. In perception, this means your brain combines what it senses right now with what it already expects, based on past experience to form a final perception. Now, efficient coding is all about how information is represented. Think of it like this. If a certain thing happens a lot in the world, like a horizontal line in an image, your brain likely has a very precise way of representing that. If something is rare, your brain might use its resources a bit more sparingly for it. This principle suggests that neural codes are optimized to transmit as much information as possible about the environment given biological constraints like energy. The really cool part is how these two ideas combine. The way our brains efficiently encode sensory information becomes the input for the Bayesian inference process, and both of these processes are guided by the statistics of the environment. This framework helps explain why we can sometimes perceive things in ways that seem a bit off, like consistent biases. To visualize this, imagine a stimulus like the orientation of a line. The first step is encoding. The brain processes this visual information and represents it internally. This internal representation is where efficient coding comes in. The brain dedicates more resources to things it sees often. The second step is decoding. The brain then uses this internal representation along with its prior expectations about the world to make a judgment or perception. This is where Bayesian inference happens. A classic example used in the paper is visual orientation. We tend to see a lot of objects that are oriented horizontally or vertically. These are called cardinal orientations. Diagonal or oblique orientations are less common in natural scenes. Because cardinal orientations are so prevalent, our brains are likely to encode them with higher precision. This means they have more resolution for those orientations. When something is encoded with high precision, it means the neural response is very specific to that stimulus. If the encoding isn't perfectly precise, which is almost always the case, the resulting internal representation can be a bit blurry or uncertain. Efficient coding dictates that this uncertainty or noise will be lower for common stimuli and higher for rare stimuli. This difference in precision between common and rare stimuli causes an asymmetry. Think of it like trying to pinpoint a location on a map. If you have a very detailed map for one area and a blurry map for another, your ability to judge specific locations will differ. This asymmetry in the brain's internal representation, the likelihood function as they call it, can lead to perceptual biases. When this skewed internal representation is combined with our prior knowledge about the world, for instance, our expectation that orientations are often cardinal, the resulting perception, the posterior distribution, can be pulled away from the actual stimulus. This is the famous anti-Bayesian effect they talk about. Instead of always being pulled towards the most probable option, Sometimes the perception is pushed away from it. The paper shows how perceptual bias, that systematic deviation, is directly related to the statistical structure of the environment. Specifically, it is linked to how quickly the precision of encoding changes across different stimulus values. If precision changes rapidly, you are more likely to see a bias. This provides a precise mathematical link between what we see in the environment and how our perception can be biased. So, how do researchers actually test this? They use something called psychophysics. This involves carefully designed experiments where people perform tasks like identifying or estimating a stimulus. For example, participants might be asked to judge the orientation of a line by measuring how accurately people perform and where they tend to make mistakes. Researchers can infer their internal perception and how it is biased. One common task involves showing someone an image of an oriented bar, then after a short delay, asking them to reproduce that orientation by rotating another bar. This tests their memory and perception of orientation. And what did they find? In studies like the one shown here, they observed that people's estimated orientations were systematically repelled from the cardinal axis. This means if a line was almost vertical, people might judge it as being slightly more diagonal at the same time. Their ability to distinguish between close orientations, the precision was highest for those common cardinal orientations. This perfectly matches the predictions of Bayesian efficient coding. This theory isn't just about simple visual features like orientation. It extends to more complex situations. For instance, they discuss the size-weight illusion. You know how sometimes a small, dense object can feel heavier than a large, light object? This illusion can also be explained by Bayesian efficient coding. Because our brains have learned statistical relationships between size and weight from experience. Even in tasks involving numbers, this framework seems to apply. When people estimate the magnitude of numbers, they show biases that can be explained by efficient coding. If our brains are used to dealing with certain ranges of numbers more often than others, it will encode those more frequent numbers more precisely, leading to predictable biases. While the theory is powerful, it is not without its challenges and ongoing developments. One area of discussion is about how much the brain optimizes for accuracy versus how much it adapts to specific tasks or costs, which is explored through different loss functions. Imagine you are in a situation where a small error is fine, but a large error is disastrous. Your brain might adjust its perception to avoid those catastrophic errors, even if it means being slightly less accurate overall. Another important development discussed is decomposing bias into its originating components. The paper suggests that bias isn't just one thing. It can arise from how information is encoded in the first place and how it is decoded or interpreted later. This is like saying a distorted image can be due to a faulty camera lens encoding or a misunderstanding of how to read the image, decoding. Understanding these separate components helps us understand the mechanics of perception better. This research also touches on the idea that perhaps the brain doesn't always aim for perfect efficiency or accuracy in the strictest sense. Sometimes it might be optimizing for something else, like survival or successful navigation in a complex world. This means the efficient coding might be tailored to specific goals, not just general information transmission. The researchers talk about how their models are being refined to better explain real-world observations. Sometimes experimental results show biases that are larger than the original theories predicted, or patterns that seem contradictory. By adjusting the models, for example, by considering different types of loss functions, or by separating the encoding and decoding aspects more distinctly, they can better account for these complex behaviors. A really interesting part of this research is how it addresses adaptation. Our environment isn't static. This framework suggests that our brains can rapidly adjust their encoding and inference strategies based on recent experiences. For example, if you spend a lot of time in a place with a particular orientation of objects, your perception might subtly adapt to that. This short-term adaptation works alongside the long-term evolutionary adaptations. This adaptation isn't just about immediate perception. It seems to influence our working memory too. If you are remembering a series of items, your brain might allocate its limited memory resources more efficiently based on the patterns it detects in that series. However, there are also some debates and open questions, particularly around how quickly adaptation happens and whether it affects encoding, decoding, or both equally. Some studies suggest that while our prior beliefs might adapt quickly, the actual way our brains encode sensory information might change more slowly or be influenced by longer-term environmental statistics. This hints at the sophisticated interplay between rapid learning and more ingrained patterns. A major outstanding question is whether these computational components, like the repulsion from precise encoding and the attraction towards probable prior beliefs, have distinct physical locations or mechanisms in the brain. Uncovering these neural signatures would be a huge step forward. Ultimately, Bayesian efficient coding offers a powerful and unifying framework for understanding perception. It moves beyond simply describing what we see to explaining why we see it that way, grounding our perceptions in the statistical realities of the world and the elegant efficiency of our neural processing. This research provides a compelling narrative for why our brains make the choices and judgments they do, even when they seem a bit quirky. It suggests a rationality in our perception that is deeply tied to how we efficiently process the information available to us, constantly balancing what we sense with what we expect. It is a reminder that our brains are not passive receivers of information, but active interpreters, constantly making intelligent guesses based on a lifetime of environmental statistics. As this paper highlights, there are still many exciting avenues to explore. For instance, how does this all work across different senses beyond vision? And how do we precisely disentangle the contributions of encoding versus decoding when it comes to adaptation? And what about moments of high uncertainty or noise in our perception? How does the theory hold up then? These questions are crucial for a complete understanding of how our minds work. The ongoing research in this area promises to shed even more light on the sophisticated and efficient ways our brains navigate the complexities of the world. It is a testament to the power of combining computational modeling with careful behavioral experiments. So, what do you think? Does this theory of Bayesian efficient coding resonate with your own experiences of perception? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this dive into the science interesting, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the amazing world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.